Hello, welcome back to the Housing Sector Podcast. I am again joined by our friend Suz from SHAC. Suz, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Plenty keeping us busy at the moment, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Ben.
Yes, it has. It's been a strange week. I've got a list of things that we're going to talk about. Shall we start with Green Square Accord?
Tell us what's happening with the Green Square Accord, because we haven't heard about them for a while. So
We haven't heard about them for a while, no. Well, we seem to be playing nice. I've had an email from them saying, we're stopping communication plans. And I've been thinking, well, why would they do that? Why would they do that? And I think, well, I didn't adhere to them. I didn't follow them. I made that absolutely clear when my undertakings came. I said, no, I'll email anyone I want. And I can use that by creating a new email address. If you don't respond to an email that's gone through the customer service desk, I shall escalate it. So it wasn't doing them any good. And I think with the Housing Ombudsman investigation and the ICO, they're going, well, why are we... It's going to look bad that we've had this in place for, 5 years now without actually having any merit or reason. So, yeah, and now we're playing nice. And I had a meeting with the home ownership team. It's Wednesday. What day was that? Monday. To do tenant satisfaction engagement measures. And we cleared the air a little bit. But I must admit, it's all quite strange.
yeah, so tell us, why did they put it on in the first place? Because people might not know that who are watching. They might not know. I know there's a lot of background, but this was really a very specific action that they took against you, wasn't it?
Yeah, this followed on that. So the first time when I started raising issues in 2016, I sent it through the customer service desk, and I quickly, thought, well, hang on a minute, I've got a background in sales. If you need to find someone to email, you go on LinkedIn. You got the email address format. So when it didn't get past the customer service desk and it just got bounced around for a couple of weeks, I found more important people to put on, the customer service directors and whatnot. And when I did that, they suddenly sprung into action. Oh my goodness me. And that was great. And then we kind of worked through a few things, and I had a meeting with, and this is when it was Green Square, had a meeting with Ruth, Cooke and Rachel Crownshaw, and then the merger happened, and then suddenly, it was, we're going to put a communication plan on you. And the reason we're doing that is because you're sending too many emails. And
the communication plan restricts how you can get in touch with them. That's the idea of it. It's a punitive measure, isn't it?
Yeah, and it should be used if you're abusing staff, which I never was. And they were never able to provide evidence of that. But what they would do with every 3 months, they would increase now he's upsetting junior female members of the team. And I go, well, where's the evidence of this? Where, provide the evidence. And they never did. And then I would record the calls. So they've got call recordings of and this was a particular month where they said I'd upset junior female members of the team. And I said, well, I've got all the emails and I've got the call recordings, and I sent them to a contact I had then who was doing training. And I said, look, if this is me, if I've got this wrong, if I'm, as they say, let me know. And she said, no, you're quite assertive, but there's nothing wrong with that. So they were never founded. And communication plans, I found out from other housing operations, it's used as a last resort. And you really have to be quite abusive to have them on. And I never was abusive, because you don't get anywhere. You've lost the fight if you do that.
Yeah. But it speaks to... Sorry, go on.
No, that's it.
I think it speaks to, a particular approach that some housing associations will take. So some of them will just completely ignore you, won't they? That's what we see in SHAC. Some of them will just completely ignore you. They'll send very polite messages about how they're going to be right on it, and everything like that. But there are certain housing associations where they come down really, really hard. I think Clarion is one of those. We see that with Clarion a lot. There's a lot of intimidation. And Green Square Accord is the other one that I think we would put up there from the feedback that we get from members, is that their response is aggression and bullying, and that seems to be like their stock response. And it would have the effect for a lot of people of putting them off, because you feel like you're facing this is a David and Goliath battle. You know, they've got control over your home, over what repairs get done and things like that. So people are just intimidated by it.
And they do readily threaten eviction. They did recently to one of our neighbours, you know, and that is the thing, and people are scared. And I get that. I didn't really get scared until the housing ombudsman had found in my favour. And I thought, well, that's going to be the beginning of the end, because they've upheld everything. Green Square Court pushed back, and then after the review, it was upheld again. And I thought, well, that will kind of be the end of it. We'll start fixing things. We'll start getting things right. And they didn't. They doubled down. And that was when we got the first legal letter, you know. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. You know, and luckily, you know, my wife used to be a legal secretary. And I kept it from her, which was stupid, because she just qualified as a counsellor, and I didn't want to give her a bad news. I kept it from her for about 3 or 4 days, and then I was going out of my mind with worry, if I'm honest. And then by the time it came round to telling her, I said, Neve, we need to have a chat. And she thought I was having an affair, I was going to leave her. She built all this thing up in her head. And then when I showed her this letter, she just read it, and she went, well, that's bullshit. That's rubbish. How can that be? And I went, really? And she went, yeah, they're just making it up to make it sound. And it did. It read really scary. But yeah, as we joke, and Neve still does joke about it, you know, my husband's annoying. And they put that in there. I must not be annoying to anyone. But what we later found out is once we'd gone to court, it wasn't about getting the conviction. It wasn't about, you know, me agreeing to that. It was about getting me to agree to some of it. And I offered them undertakings, which they celebrated as a great win. And the judge warned me, and we should have listened, but we didn't quite understand the legal speak. We thought we were just going to put an end to it and move on with our lives. But once you agree to not do something, and I agreed to take down the roofcook.co.uk, which is back up again now because they didn't they didn't take it out after I gave it up, so they could have done, protected themselves. So I had some backup plans, of things I could negotiate with that I didn't mind having. I didn't want roofcook.co.uk, so that was in there for the negotiation. And the judge said, you know, you shouldn't be doing this. She knew before, you know, but couldn't say it. Yeah. So we agreed to these undertakings, and then, you know, within a couple of weeks, he's breached the undertakings. Well, how have I breached the undertakings? Because, you know, Neve had them pinned on the fridge. You are not going to do. Make sure, if in doubt, you check the fridge. Check the fridge. So I hadn't done any of it, and then they changed halfway through. You know, we get to go to court, and before we go to court, they've changed the breaches that I've supposedly under. You know, and it hadn't. But it was about getting a conviction then. Because that isn't just Green Square Accord. That's then I made a promise to the court and I breached it. That then becomes the offence. Yeah, but the judge just dismissed it. She just said, you want to impose a custodial sentence. He's not breached any of the things. There was nothing in there about removing historic content. And they were saying, well, you've still got this web page up. Well, yeah, you never got what you wanted. So look, I'm hoping, and I think it's due to the fact that they've no investigations are happening. I think it's due to the fact that it's difficult for them to get their money, their fingers on some of the money that's coming up for bidding. It's difficult because we've done the service charge review of housing benefit. And it's difficult because the platforms are growing, you know, and now it's senior leaders who look at it. So as many people have said, including yourself, Suz, you know, careful. Careful, because I don't think they're playing nice because they want to be my friend.
Yeah, I think my advice to you was beware the smile of a crocodile, and I think that's definitely the smile of a crocodile that you're getting at the moment. But I think you are going in with your eyes open, really. I think you know what they're like, and you will know what to trust and what not to trust with them, really. But you know. It is. I wish that people could see that. Is that, you know, with these really bullying housing associations, that just stand your ground. Just stand your ground, because they will back down. You know, if you are in the right, You know, if you need to get advice on whether you're right or wrong, then get that advice from wherever you can. You know, when we have a kind of SHAC community where people will give, you know, are very happy to kind of peer review things and tell you about their experiences and stuff. But if you believe you are on solid ground, stand your ground. You know, they will back down eventually. But it really is about people feeling very vulnerable. But as we've talked about it before, there is a bit of a sense that the tide is turning.
The wife has just come home there. Yeah, I do. And more people are standing up. And I think the mistake so many people make is, first of all, that they go in there with, with the bad language, with the personal abuse, you know, and that is it. And when I saw the lawyer for the first time, we paid for an hour with a lawyer when I first made my wife aware, and the lawyer said I get a lot of these, but she said usually it's because they've been abusive and threatening to kill them and things like that. I said, well, I haven't been doing that. She went, no, I can see. I don't really know, but that was clear then that this is the playbook. So don't be abusive. Yeah. Don't threaten to kill anyone. Stand your ground. Keep the facts. And they can't really do anything with you. They can't handle you in any way. But that said, this has been going on now. We're 2026, so I'm still trying to get a lift fixed. You know.
Yeah.
That's
part of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah. The service charge, you've been doing some work on service charges at SHAC, some great work there. You know, and they just seem to going up and up and up and up. What's the sort of the feeling at the minute amongst sort of residents of SHAC?
Yeah, we're getting interest from people. I've just had another estate email us today about what they need to do to protect themselves if they want to withhold payment, because the service charge demands have started the sort of 26, 27, financial year. Service charge demands have started landing on people's mats. And again, we are seeing these massive increases in the service charge demands. At the moment, Southern seem to be going for the top spot in terms of ludicrous service charge rises. I mean, just ridiculous ones that we've heard already. So, partly to support, we are bringing strategic legal action. That's our aim. And partly just because this is a good time of the year really to be starting to talk about service charges. Partly because government is in a little bit more of a listening mode, because obviously there are elections coming up in May. So a combination of factors. We did a little bit more research. And one of the pieces of research that we did was to look at every single First-tier Property Tribunal judgment that was published last year, where the judge actually reached a conclusion, because sometimes they can't reach a conclusion and they defer it pending more information and things like that. So every single one concerning service charges, about the level of service charge, and we looked at every single one, and over 63% of those the judge found contained some level of overcharging. So the judge ordered either removal of a service charge or reduction in the service charge. And that could be, I mean, that ranged quite a lot. So it could be that, the service charge, was excessive. And in some cases, it was that the service just wasn't being provided. And I think there's a couple of things that it's really important to emphasise here, because you could say, oh, well, the system works, doesn't it? You just go to tribunal, you get your case heard. I mean, one of the things is that I would really want to highlight is exactly what you were describing about going into a court and not knowing, not being a legal expert, that's not your background. You're not a legal expert. So you're at a huge disadvantage. I mean, you bought 1 hour's worth of solicitor's time. For some people, even that would be beyond their means. We know that we've got members who are using food banks, for example, because they can't make ends meet. So even that might be too expensive for them. So that's one of the things. People are at a huge disadvantage, and therefore some are just won't even try because of that. But the other thing is The cases that make it to tribunal are the ones where the landlord is still refusing to acknowledge that they are overcharging. And despite that, well over 60% were found to be overcharging. What we also find from, and this is from our experience at SHAC, is that a lot of landlords will go up to the wire with it, and then in the week before the tribunal gets to court, the case gets to court and the hearing, date is set, they will at that point admit it. So they won't go into court, but they'll test. They'll try and see whether people will be deterred from going and will kind of give up in fear before the court actually sits, and before the tenant or resident gets their day in court. So there's this huge, it really is the tip of a very big iceberg. The ones that actually make it into court are the ones where the landlord is still adamantly refusing to admit that they have overcharged in their service charge demand. And that intimidation comes into it as well, because the courts can order, if you lose a case at tribunal, the courts can order you to pay the other side's cost. And of course, the other side has turned up with a barrister, a team of paralegals, their own solicitors. So they're racking up the cost of the legal fees. And the landlords will nearly always say, if you lose, we will ask the court for you to cover our legal expenses. Courts will very, very rarely ever grant that. It would really have to come across as a completely unfounded, vexatious case for a court to say, right, you've got to pay the other side's fees. So it's a hollow threat in that sense, but people can't take that risk, can they?
No.
How can I afford to take on £100,000 worth that they've just spent on legal fees? So again, that's the kind of intimidation tactic that they will use. So I think the tribunal judgments that do make it there really have to be seen in that context, that there are very few where people have the wherewithal to actually get into a court. And that could be a lot of different reasons. It could be, fear of those costs. It could be that they don't speak English as a first language and they're not familiar with kind of court bureaucracy and all of that, and they feel intimidated by it. The one of the things we looked at this time, which we haven't done with previous research, was what difference did it make to the outcomes when the tenant had legal representation, because some tenants do, or resident, and the landlord does, and the various kind of combinations. The tenant does, but the landlord doesn't. The landlord does, but the tenant doesn't. And we didn't find over the entire population, we didn't find any difference. The only time we found a difference was when we narrowed it down to just the housing association population. And that made a real difference. If the tenants didn't have legal representation, presumably because the housing associations generally have a lot of money, so they can afford to bring in the top legal people. So people are, it's a really kind of solid statistical evidence that people are being disadvantaged by not having access to legal aid or any kind of legal support. So I think there's a couple of very important findings out of this research, which is up on our website. We've sent it to every single MP. We've written to Matthew Pennycook, Steve Reed and Keir Starmer with it, asking them, are they going to now do something about it? We've heard nothing from them. We've obviously shared it with our members. But we will be using it. We've sent it on to the barrister as well, so that that is good evidence for the court case, the legal challenge that we're aiming to bring. So yeah, quite timely.
That link will be in the comments field as well, so you can read that for yourselves. And that was something that I had with my legal action. I got hand delivered the night before we were supposed to go to court. Yeah. The warning of, you're going to, if you lose, you'll pay our court costs, which could be many thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds. And I remember again going, oh my God, I've got this now to cope with. And met Neve in town, and she said, well, we haven't even lost yet. And then I was still quite panicked. And then my old man rung up, and I was like, I've got this thing. He said, we haven't lost yet. How can they be giving you costs when you haven't lost? I was like, but it was that intimidation all the way. And that's...
You can ask before the court case. I mean, this might be useful for some of your listeners as well. that you can ask before the hearing or at the start of the hearing for the judge to make a ruling at that point. So you can put in a request that ruling, that it would be refused. And that's a really good idea. So we'd highly recommend that people put in what's called a cost protection order, I think it's called, something like that. So it's, you know, it says really that even if you lose, you won't be paying the landlord's legal fees.
Now, are people finding, because we've done a Section 22, this is me and a few of my neighbours, we did the Section 22, that was late, that's supposed to be a month. And what we've got come back is screenshots, doesn't show any amount of money. So, yeah, and I think, well, that doesn't quite meet the threshold, surely. Am I right in that?
Yeah, so they're supposed to share invoices. They're supposed to share an invoice pack, and a screenshot is not an invoice. You don't invoice by screenshot, do you?
No, because you could put whatever money in there. And then this week we've got the adjustment, and they've had to admit that they've made errors. So already we've got a reduction, and I haven't gone through it all yet, so I probably won't talk about it. But we've definitely got a reduction because they found some things that had been mischarged or for the wrong year. And then that obviously brings us on to the housing benefit and the lack of oversight there are by MPs and councillors. When I was in the freedom of information for the council, you know, the first question was how much have you paid them in housing benefit over the last 3 years? Do you split rent with service charge so you can make an understanding of how much is service charge? They didn't. Is there any oversight? Do you have any policies in place? And they were all coming back saying, no, we don't. And our local councillor, Labour, Annalise Dobbs and councillor Ed Turner, they made the visit, knocking on the doors the other Sunday. You know, we want to hear from you. Okay. But, you know, and this isn't a slight of Ed, actually. This is support. He actually came back and said, well, look, I can come round and we can go through all the you know, all the checklist of the damp, the mould, the fire risks, etc. But as you know, I email them and they don't respond to me and I have very little power. And I thought, okay, now we can actually move forward. Now that you're admitting as a councillor that you have very little power over this huge organisation that seems to run carte blanche on everyone. And I said, well, maybe you can help with the service charge because this is a way that you could protect the council's budget because this is all coming out of taxpayers, as I wrote about in the taxpayers' burden. So I'm hoping that we can prove that actually if we extrapolate the percentage that we've managed to get reduced just at this first hurdle, then that equates to big money, especially when you think of the likes of Birmingham, where, you know, they can't even pay the bin men.
So when we saw, sorry, go on. Go on. Yeah. Well, when we saw what you were doing, we got very excited over at SHAC. We got very excited by it, and we put out probably about 200 freedom of information requests to about 200 councils. Although some of them seem to kind of club together and you know have one organisation doing it for all of them. But anyway, that's about the ballpark figure. And we asked them about the checks as well. And what we've found overwhelmingly, we're still crunching the numbers, as they say, but what we've found overwhelmingly is that they only check on the question of eligibility. The vast majority of them only check on the question of eligibility. So is this a theoretically eligible charge? So if you said, well, I want housing benefit to cover £30 a week to have my meals delivered because I'm in, you know, extra care supported housing or something like that, that wouldn't be eligible under, because it's personal care, it couldn't come out of housing benefit. So it's just that eligibility question. What it doesn't do, and what we were specifically asking about, is what about the validity of it? So if they were claiming for a lift maintenance but there's no lift in that building, how would they pick it up? Most of them wouldn't. And these are things, and the kind of things where, you know, which you've seen, like double invoicing, where there's a duplicate invoice, where they're charging £500 to change a light bulb, you know, those kind of things. These wouldn't be picked up. So we're gonna produce a report on that because I think it is a very important point. It's about the money going straight from the taxpayer's purse, effectively, into the landlord's pocket, because that's one of the things we ask for. Is it paid to the tenant, or is it, well, resident, or is it paid directly to the landlord? And a lot of them pay directly to the landlord, and a lot of the housing benefit accounts go straight to housing associations, who, as we say from the previous bit of research, are the worst offenders when it comes to overcharging. So we know that there's this overcharging going on. When people do scrutinise it, they identify very, very regularly overcharging. But all of this money is going from the taxpayer without ever being scrutinised. And we did even have some councils come back and say, we don't do any checks at all because the law says that the landlord can only charge for certain things. So they're just assuming that the landlords are following the law, following their legal obligations. And again, that is such a wrong assumption to be making when it comes to service charges, but probably loads of other things as well, to be honest. That it's just open season for them. How much would we like to get out of the taxpayer in Oxford or, you know, Bristol or wherever, you know, let's just put those service charges through.
And talking about the legality there, when we pushed back over an increase last time, and it was the maintenance fee for the admin fee. And we said, well, hang on a minute, I'm not getting value for money. You don't respond to emails. How can you put it up by 15%? And the response was, legally, we're allowed to put it up by 15% every year. And you think, well, hang on a minute, you know? Yeah. Did you find with the Freedom of Information Act, I was amazed at, first of all, each council seemed to, some you had to upload it to their website, some you had to email them, and then they seemed to respond in different ways. And you think, well, actually, I've structured it quite easily, you know, to just respond to, and many did, but others were like, oh, in different bits. And then Walsall Council, who, and there was one other, and I can't think who they are now, so it's not just Walsall. They came back and said, oh no, that would take far too time consuming to find all those emails and all that information. We think, well, so you've got absolutely no idea whatsoever. And not only that, even if you had a suspicion, you couldn't go and ask for it. And a point I wanted to make for listeners and viewers, you know, going, oh, hang on a minute, that's ridiculous. They charged for a lift that wasn't there. That would never happen. But what we found is with mergers and mergers and mergers, they don't have a clear idea of the stock that they own. And we found many cases of this. And there was the lady who took out her own management agency because she said, you know, we were charging for, and have then had them come back and they did not know which blocks they were actually responsible for, and yet had been happily charging for it. That was First Port, as we remember. So on
the consistency point, I think that is really important, because the thing that we found, because we were kind of taking a slightly different angle, so that, you know, between the two of them, I think each of the bits of research that we're doing are going to add quite a lot of value. And, you know, one of the things that was really obvious is that it's down to every individual council to decide how it wants to approach housing benefit and how much it wants to check or not check at all. There's no consistent requirement other than that they check the eligibility. There is no consistent requirement on councils about how they do it. So one of the questions we asked two kind of other questions in the foyer. One of them was about how many housing benefit accounts have got service charges on them. And loads of councils said, we don't record that, but some councils do record it. We asked how many of those go straight to housing associations. Again, some of them said, oh, it's 92% or 100% or whatever it was. Some of them said, well, we don't record what type of landlord it is, whether it's private or council or housing association. So this huge lack of consistency you could not get, even if you wanted to, and even if government had the power to kind of order them to report it, they just don't hold the information consistently at the moment. It's a very deliberate, let's keep everything covered in this kind of, you know, mist, so you can't ever see the picture clearly. I think it's very deliberate.
And this is a huge chunk of change as well. I mean, the Green Square Accord lot, for the last 3 years, and 11 councils responded, over £41 million.
It's staggering. At a time when they keep talking about housing benefits cheats and migrants on housing benefit, and it's anything else is a drop in the ocean compared to to the embezzlement that is going on by landlords, isn't it?
Yeah, and look, there's obviously a lot more that we're going to be exploring and exposing on this. I would just like to add that I am not suicidal and my car is in good shape, and if something were to happen to me, it wasn't of my doing. Suz, we've been rabbitting away for a nice half an hour now. I have to ask you something. I have to ask. Stop social housing stigma. I think it's an absolute charade. And their latest report...
You're going to have to repeat that. It cut out. Sorry, Ben. It cut out. So I'm going to have to get you to repeat that.
Stop social housing stigma. They published a report again yesterday. And in this report, they mentioned Grenfell 7 times in the... just in the second paragraph alone, third paragraph, stop social housing stigma have therefore decided to use our response to consultation to reflect on what is cumulative, a process that started in 2017 following the Grenfell tragedy. The two things weren't linked as far as I can say, but it gets mentioned 7 times in there. But my big bugbear with it is when I've spoken to Nick Bliss and some other woman who came on, well, what is it you want to know and why? You know, we've got damp and mould and fire risks, and we've got this company, this little community group. Oh, we're going to stop social housing stigma. What is the stigma? How are you going to stop a mindset? Oh, well, we're going to remove words, and we're not going to have this, and we're not going to have that. And I think if you asked the survivors of Grenfell, hang on a minute, would you rather have a safe home to live in, or would you rather that you weren't stigmatised against because you were in social housing? I know what the answer would be, but have I got it wrong? Am I coming down too heavy on this guy and this? For me, it's another. It gives the housing associations a nice badge to put on their website. Oh, we're stopping social housing. We won't stigmatise. And it also, from the other funders, they're sort of training. Oh, we'll provide the training to sort that out. If your CEO is allowing stigma of people in social housing, their customers, then that's the issue that you need to fix. And you're not going to do that by paying for a badge. Or, Suz, have I got it wrong?
No
pressure.
I think those are very, very valid points. I think it's kind of confusing cause and effect, isn't it? So the underlying cause of why they want to keep tenants and, residents in the case of leaseholders and shared owners very downtrodden is it's a very powerful kind of economic justification for that, isn't it? From their perspective, they are making a mint out of exploiting people, and not just through service charges, through a whole load of other ways. We could look at, for example, the fact that a lot of general needs properties are being converted to temporary accommodation because, again, they can charge through councils through the nose to have these. And that's where a lot of local housing allowance budget is going for councils. So there are very kind of powerful economic motivators to help ease that through. That's when the stigmatisation of tenants and residents comes in. So it's kind of they're putting the cart before the horse. The stigmatisation is not, as far as I see it, is not the underlying cause. The underlying cause is the economics of it. You need to get to, if you want to solve these problems, you have to get to grips with the economic case that is supporting it, the economic base that is supporting it. Just trying to take away the language. It's the symptom rather than dealing with the underlying disease. I guess that's the way I would see it. So I think you are justified in your frustrations, really. Because it's focusing on the wrong level, I guess, would be the way I would see it.
It's almost just it's pay to play, isn't it? Oh, look, you can get this training, you can get that through us. We're going to go to all the events, and something we don't have time to cover in this one is all the events that are ramping up again. My inbox is full of, we're doing this event, that event, and again, it's all money that comes from us through our service charge that just seeps out, and they'll plead poverty, and they're all after this, the government grant of, I've got 27 billion or 39 billion, it depends where you read, but they're all ready to get, as Housing Digital called it, up for grabs. And that's the mentality, isn't it? But that's all
Yeah.
going to siphon back into these people who profit from the not-for-profit, the wage wasters, the events, the corporations. And then at the far end of the scale, you've got Nick Bliss going, we'll give you a badge to put on your website and you can fund us. And it says that you don't believe that people should be stigmatised.
Yeah.
Well, do they? Surely they don't, but that gives them a get out clause. Yeah. So I think we've rabbited on enough. That's been very great. Would you? I mean, we should do some more of these, just chin wagging away. What do you think?
I think it works, but I like being the interrogator sometimes. As you know, if you ask me a question, I'll rant for quite a long time. But it's quite nice to be on the other side of the desk as well, and to be doing the interrogation. Switch the lamp around from time to time.
We could both rant for England. So there we go. Suz, thank you very much indeed. God bless you. Good luck to everyone at SHAC, and keep strong. Like and subscribe, all of that. Follow if you want. It helps apparently. And to everyone listening, walking their dog, driving their car, hello. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Thanks, Suz. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.